If you said to me, I want to build a social credit system that can be used to enforce control against the American people and basically lock them down with both enforcement and social credit, I would go get the Social Security data, the IRS data, and the Treasury payment data, and that's exactly what they did.
So I wanted to show you this. This is Catherine Fitz. We've had her on the show before, and she was in the George W. Bush administration, and ever since then, she's been kind of a truth teller. So I'm going to play this video of Catherine Austin Fitz, and we'll get your response.
And what it looks to me like Trump and Musk are implementing the control grid at high speed. What you have to say is, okay, to do a control grid, we need a digital ID implemented that's very high quality, high precise. Check the box. We need an all digital financial system. Check the box. You know, we need a way of doing interoperable money. Check the box. If you look at what DOGE is doing, we need a social credit system. Check the box.
Wait, what do you mean by that? What DOGE is doing?
Danny, they've been aggregating this kind of data. I used to call it the data beast. So they've been aggregating this kind of powerful data since the 90s. So I don't think this is all new. So, for example, you
IRS data, healthcare data, and combining it all together into one system combined with AI.
It's interesting because Musk was out raising capital for XAI and had a deal with Palantir AI at the same time. And my guess, you know, I think
Palantir has an AI?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Well, according to published reports, XAI and Palantir had made a partnership, and when Musk was sucking all this data out. And my guess is that data is, you know, they sucked it into the AI on the just do it method. So if I wanted to stop fraud in the U.S. government, I would say there's 20 trillion missing from DOD, there's $1 trillion missing from HUD. I'm going to go in, figure out where it went, get it back.
Right.
That's not what they did. If you said to me, I want to build a social credit system that can be used to enforce control against the American people and basically lock them down with both enforcement and social credit, I would go get the Social Security data, the IRS data, and the Treasury payment data, and that's exactly what they did.
So Trump is actually building a control grid of it's like he's a robot right out of the WEF or China for that matter. It's the exact opposite of what MAGA thought they were voting for, right? I mean, let me just get your response to what she said. That's happening, right?
100%. And Catherine Austin Fitz of Solari does great work. She's part of the Independent Media Alliance that myself and Whitney and Ryan formed. And Catherine has been ahead of this. In fact, that documentary I mentioned from 2006, Catherine was in it. She's been warning about this coming, and she's been able to see this. And I will just point out too, what she's describing there is it's important for people to understand that deep relationship that Palantir and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk have. I know that there's this, I'm just trying to crack through the illusion that people think Elon is a hero. I personally think that is another psyop that a lot of people are falling into, and Elon may have just played his role and then now he's stepping away. What people need to understand is that DOGE, the actual purpose of DOGE, as Catherine was outlining there, is to make government more efficient, but not in the sense of make it more efficient to work better for people, but to make it a more technocratic government. And for those who don't really understand or know the history of technocracy, I'll just briefly outline.
So you know what? Hang on.
If you don't mind, Jimmy.
I'm going to actually hold off one second on that, and because I'm going to show that short documentary that you put together, which is very. But just to kind of put a button on this Palantir segment of this of today's show. It took just 6 weeks to go from ICE partnering with Palantir to track immigrants to the government partnering with Palantir to track all Americans. That's from the TrumpFile.org. And here's the guy who runs Palantir. We've showed him before. He's a true psychopath. He's the perfect guy that the CIA would pick to do this job. And Reed Cooley tweets out, CIA agent and head of Palantir, Alex Karp, says his company's software single-handedly stopped the far right in Europe. So let's listen to him say this.
Look, we built PG, which single-handedly stopped the rise of the far right in Europe. We built Foundry, which was just...
So when he says they stopped... So what he's saying is they stopped a populist political movement that was spurned on by open borders policies, that was spurned on by more war and NATO. So what he's saying is, this CIA guy, which is what he is, their company couldn't have started or without the money from the CIA. The CIA, there wasn't a company. The CIA gave them billions of dollars and said, go start doing this. And they did it. And so he's bragging that they actually squashed populist political movements. And the way they do the cover for doing that and talking about it publicly is they call it far right. Well, if there's anything more far right than funding literal Nazis, which is what the European Union is doing in Ukraine, that I don't know what it is, because that's what far right is. They're talking about people pushing back against open borders and people pushing back against censorship. That's not far right. That used to be called unions activity in the United States and lefties, but they call it far right, just like they call me far right. So any time the establishment wants to discredit you or dismiss you, they call you far right. And that's what he's doing there. What he's really admitting to is that we, the CIA, use their technology to stop a populist political movement. The same kind of populist political movement MAGA thought Donald Trump was going to be. And it turns out he was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it was a Trojan horse. Because now that Donald Trump is inside the beast, he's unleashing pukes like this on you. And he's going to create a social credit system for you. He's going to create a digital ID for you and digital banking. And it's all going to be undone under one thing. And it's all going to be run by guys like this, not people you vote for. Donald Trump doesn't even understand how this works. So let's listen to what else he has to say. So
used to distribute the COVID vaccine and saved millions of lives.
So they were involved in COVID, forcing people to take experimental medical treatments at the behest of the state, which is really the techno-feudal corporate state.
Globally, we built what we call multi-constellation, and what's often called the digital kill chain. And they're category-defining products. So when you deliver these products to the market, just honestly, people say this isn't going to exist, this isn't valuable, but then it changes the market. And then the market is the Palantir market. Now, that doesn't mean everyone in the world is going to buy our product, but it means most of the sensible people in the world are going to buy from the category we defined.
So what he's saying there is that, you've heard this term, the Internet of Bodies, right? And so through the Internet of Bodies, they're going to even know our thoughts. And this is very much like, science fiction. I remember the Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where they could predict that you were going to do a crime and then go arrest you. That's what they're kind of talking about here. And so if you are a dissenter to the establishment, or you are in opposition to the establishment, they're going to use this against you. They're even able to do pre-thought crimes. This is all using AI, right? And so here the Patriot Voice tweets out, Palantir is literally the deepest part of the deep state, and Trump is rolling out the red carpet for them to usher in what will certainly be the beast system, a cashless society in which you will be tracked and monitored every second of every day, and your behavior will dictate how you get to live in society. This is absolutely the Great Reset and Build Back Better repackaged MAGA style. The biggest rug pull in history. Would you agree with that, Derrick? That this is the biggest rug pull in history?
Absolutely. I mean, it's ironic to me, Jimmy, that just 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, some of the same people that were protesting against Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, calling for many of the same things now that Palantir and Trump's tech buddies are doing, were fighting it then, I think rightfully so, and we're being targeted for doing so. And now many places, I'm sure you and your audience are seeing the same things I'm seeing online. There's a lot of people making excuses. It's no big deal. We've had databases like this.
Yes.
It's, or even the QAnon sort of stories. I've seen people saying, no, Trump's actually working with Palantir because he's going to target the deep state, not the regular people. It's just used to target the deep state. So don't worry about it. It's all very sad. And I see you have my book up there. I mean, if people want to learn more about solutions, I know we're going to play my little mini documentary in a moment, but I do want to encourage people. You can download my book for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. There's a free audiobook and a free PDF. I wrote it the month before COVID started because in my journalism, I focused on facial recognition, social credit scores, and digital technology. And I started thinking, like, how are we going to thrive and survive outside of what they're building? And so I put a lot of time and thought into that, but I didn't think it was going to happen so quickly. But nevertheless, I think people need to understand, no matter who's president, the true ruling class, what I call the predator class, they operate behind and above the political system and political parties. And so no matter which corporate party's in there, they will find a way to advance that agenda. And often they do so by presenting a hero, whether that's Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump or RFK or whoever it may be. They will continue. And I'm sure we'll see another one in the next couple of years. Some sort of grassroots hero will rise and promise they're going to fix and save us from Trump. And, it'll just keep going back and forth until people are ready to see what's really going on.
And so so that your book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, how can people opt out? Can you give us a couple of,
Sure.
Ways to do that?
I'm an extremist, I'll say that. I try to push very hard into this. I haven't used banks since 2008. I only have a passport. I'm not like a sovereign citizen or something like that. I simply just try to rethink and reevaluate my relationship with technology and different forms. So I opt out of the facial recognition at the airport as it's rolling out while we still can. I opt out of the TSA body scanners. I don't use Google. I don't use Microsoft. I'm on a Linux laptop right now. Things like that. So I try to take steps I can in my own individual life and encourage other people to do the same. I also don't use big banks. I encourage people to use credit unions or to look into any alternative. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Maybe there's private Monero, cryptos like Monero or gift economy or barter, whatever you're into. I think the point is that we should focus our energy on building parallel alternative systems outside of what they're building. Even in that infamous essay and video that people saw back in 2020, the World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and be happy. If you go back and read the original article, which came out in 2016 and was published at the Wall Street Journal as well as the World Economic Forum's website, even in that dystopian description of the future where you have no privacy and no property and it's some alleged utopia, even in that description, the World Economic Forum says, sometimes I worry about the people we left behind, the people who now live outside of the cities in 18th and 19th century towns. And they kind of make it seem like we're living in poverty out there. But I believe even that is somewhat of an acknowledgement that there will be people who opt out of these systems and live maybe outside that. I don't mean like we're living in some dystopia. I think it's possible through things like permaculture and using technology in a private way to start to lay the foundation for a path for humanity that doesn't involve being subsumed by this world they're building. But we have to work fast because very quickly, as digital IDs are rolling out, which is already happening and already advanced by COVID, as facial recognition advances, social credit scores, things like this, it is going to become increasingly difficult to operate. Anybody who's already operating in the mainstream system without a credit score understands how difficult it is currently. But imagine when that's the social credit score you were describing, Jimmy, and you want to opt out of those systems. If there's nowhere to opt into or there's no alternative, then we're essentially screwed. There's nothing to do. And we end up like China, where activists can have their WeChat, one app to rule them all, turned off if they try to organize anti-COVID protests, or people can have their bank accounts turned off and things like that. We're already seeing the early version of that with Patreon, PayPal, and some of the banking, like you mentioned, the Canadian truckers movement, but it's going to get much worse. And so I focus on how do we opt out and build alternative parallel systems, whether that's health, finance, education, food, all these different areas. One just real quick other example, if you don't like Monsanto, you don't like the big box stores, I'm sure there's a farmer's market somewhere near you. Go meet the people who are growing the food you like, get to know the farmers. I'm not saying you need to become a farmer, but start to build those relationships so that you're not dependent on the big box stores that tried to force you to wear masks or tried to make you take a PCR test to get in or whatever. I mean, I think it's really just so important at this moment for people to start thinking about these ideas. I tend to call this exit and build. We exit from unsustainable slavery systems, as I call them, that do not align with our values and our principles, and instead focus on building or supporting those who are building new systems that are aligned with our values. And personally, I don't think politics is going to fix it. I don't think violence is the answer. Apathy is definitely not the answer. So I really try to be proactive in my own life and kind of lead by example. You mentioned I'm from Texas originally. I now live in Mexico. I decided to move like 6 years ago. We've got land, we're growing food, and trying to spread these ideas to other people. And I know more and more people who took this idea during COVID and realized, you know what, I'm living in Seattle, for example, and Seattle is a total COVID hellhole. So I'm going to move to a smaller town, or I'm going to move to Texas or Florida. That's kind of the exit and build idea as well. It's about exiting from systems, but it can also mean exiting from a physical location if you realize the place you're living in is not conducive to liberty and privacy and is going to be, a bad place to be in the future. You might decide to move to the town over, the state over, or in my case, the country over. Whatever you do, I think the point is to start thinking about how we, in our own hands, in our own lives, and in our local communities, can really get active. And I'll just throw out one other little tip that's in my book. If people want to learn more, if you're in a situation where you don't have anybody in your local area, I want to invite you to go to freedomcells.org, as in the cells in your body, freedom, CELLS.org. It's a simple place where people can use our maps and search and find like-minded groups and people in their area and connect in the real world to start talking about these ideas. So I encourage people to check that one out too.
Come see us on tour in Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, Liverpool, Birmingham, and London. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.